I haven't done a proper show in a long time. I feel like I'm off my game. So, welcome. How are you? I hope you're getting back into the show business, sort of. We still do trivia, then a show, trivia, then a show. So, my guest today is Cody. I don't know if it's pronounced Havard or Havard. I want to say Harvard, and you'll know why after he's a professor. But I know him for a very long time, and we're going to get right into. He really studies something that's really interesting. You wouldn't know that there's people that study this, and there's a reason for it. Hello, Tina, Neil, Linda, Christine, everybody, Donald. I'm going to bring Cody right in, and we're going to talk. Hey, Adam, how are you? Cody, how do you say your name? Is it Havard or Havard?
Havard.
It is Havard.
How are you, John?
Okay. Doing good. So I know Cody through our Disney connection, which is, and let me get this right. You study and research team rivalry?
Yeah.
Is that a good? There's another explanation. I think that's probably better than that.
Yeah. Well, I started looking at rivalries within sport and why people treat each other differently, and since then we've kind of expanded out to looking outside of the sport context as well.
Other,
so yeah, that's
other fandoms. Okay, yeah. To other fandoms. What is it? Oh, we have another warning. That's great. Maybe a big storm is going to roll in. Do you hear? Yeah. Hold on. Let's hear what's going on. If I'm going to be dying.
Warning for the following county: Lake, Florida.
Tornado warning. Oh, a flood warning. That's not going to happen here. I'm high up on a hill. Sorry about that. Let that go. In any event, well, by the way, I should ask: are you watching Ted Lasso? Please tell me you are.
We've watched the first season, and we haven't started the second season yet because I found that with that show, it's really, really fun to try to binge it.
It
and
is. I
not,
agree with that.
kind of have to wait the week to week, like it is some other shows. It's fun to wait the week. But
I
yeah, we've watched the first one. Looking forward to the second one. I saw they had just a huge night Sunday night with all
Yeah,
the awards they took home. So
I think they definitely deserved it. I didn't like
yeah.
the last episode, but being that it's team rivalry stuff, Christine, I'm going to let you keep me abreast of the weather because she's getting the messages too. I don't hear anything outside, so I think we're good. Tina, that's funny. Every time I'm on a show or a trivia, there's a catastrophe like lightning and it's bad. And I know I live in Florida where the house can go away at any moment. So yeah, I find that okay. So you are though a Disney fan, regardless of first doing it with sports, like first
Yeah.
researching sports rivalry.
Yes, definitely.
Now, I don't know if this is an easy question, but people would say, "Wow, why would they research something like that?" Can you give me any instance in which a brand or a company might find it beneficial to have some research as to why certain rivalries act and behave the way they do?
Well, so there's a few reasons. If you're looking first at the promotional aspects of it, then it's always good to know what your competitor's doing, and just kind of know the general market trends. So keeping up with like a company like Disney, keeping up with what other companies are doing. If you're looking specifically at the theme parks, looking at what different theme park companies are doing, like Six Flags, Universal, SeaWorld. But then there's always some competitors that rise to the level of what people would consider a rival. And those are typically the companies that not that both publicly, but also within an organization, you're comparing yourselves to those organizations. And so you get into what people typically refer to as keeping up with the Joneses, where it's basically you're trying to outspend the competitors so you can have more things for your consumers. You can kind of have more things to show that, kind of feathers in the cap and everything. The best example of it was when you look at the Disney Fox acquisition. If you remember that, toward the end, Comcast actually came in and tried to drive up the price on Disney. Now,
Yes.
it's you can kind of debate if Comcast really wanted Fox or if they were just trying to drive up the price. But that's something that rivals do, especially when you look back at 2004, Comcast trying to have a hostile takeover, which is what ultimately, one of the things that led to Bob Iger taking over. So there's a promotional aspect of it, and then for the kind of the protection reason of it. If you're an organization, especially something like a sports organization, where you want your fans to be excited when they're playing a rival team, because more people, there's a lot of evidence that more people are going to watch the games, attend the games, they're going to spend more money at the games, but also you don't want them going overboard where somebody does something negative or
Right.
they hurt someone because, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest it's a very small group, but there are people that attend games that that's what they have said they would definitely be willing to consider hurting their rival teams or participants or fans of those teams. And if something like that happens, then the organization just opens themselves up to a whole lot
Yeah.
of issues, lots of fandom, obviously legal fights and legal issues like that. So yeah, it is important to know from both the promotional perspective and then kind of that perspective of responsible marketing or responsible promotion, if you will.
So have you done research on both Universal and Disney and how that plays out a little bit?
So what we did, the first one we did with Disney parks, is we just looked at fans of Disney parks. And so we had people look at their behaviors and perceptions of the Disney brand and then their behaviors and perceptions of the Universal brand. And we compared that with people who said they were a fan of a sports team. And so what we found was I don't think it's a surprise to anybody.
Similarities.
But there would be, if you're a fan of a sports team, people were more negative toward their rival sport team than a Disney Parks fan was toward Universal Parks, which makes sense because especially if you don't live in the Orlando area or Southern California, if you're visiting, you're probably more likely to attend both parks if you're doing a once in a lifetime trip or a once every 3 or 4 years trip.
I mean, I attend both parks, but I do have a favorite.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and something that I think that's important, I notice on every survey that Universal or Disney sends me, they usually put me into a category so that they know how to take my answers. And they'll say, do you consider yourself more a fan of Disney, more a fan of Universal? I bet you it's for that reason that if I say I'm more a fan of Disney and I give them some negative feedback, they know, this is skewed in that direction. You think they give it less weight?
Well, and it could be that, and it also could be companies have certain times when they're trying to go after their 80-20 rule. Basically 80% of your business comes from 20% of your consumers. So like the most loyal fans. So if you're talking about theme parks, those are your annual pass holders usually. And so there's times that they're trying to go after those. So if you're saying I'm more a fan of Disney, then maybe they would place more weight on an annual parks person's perceptions than yours. However, there's also times they could be running an internal campaign within their company that they're trying to attract fans of Disney to Universal, or Disney's trying to attract fans of Universal to Disney. I mean, you look at all the advertisements that especially Universal runs, where they kind of favorably compare themselves to Disney. They promote themselves as like the it's not the adult park, but the park where you can go and you can have fun on the roller coasters and everything. They probably are. They definitely have a reason that they're asking those questions.
I'm not even sure if you're aware of this. Are you aware that on Twitter, especially Universal, goes away from the professionalism and pokes a little bit of fun at Disney usually?
Yeah, I've seen every once in a while that they'll do stuff like that. And
like when the dragon was on fire in the Magic Kingdom, I remember Universal would be like, we don't have any dragons on fire in our park. And I think that's pretty funny. I kind of like it. I think it's like, oh my God, they do that kind of thing. Yeah. I don't know if Disney goes back. I think Universal enjoys the look of the underdog a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and I think I kind of remember just reading a few books, like Ron Schneider's book and everything goes into this, but reading a few things that it seems, Disney has that kind of wholesome brand, whereas Universal is a little more irreverent. And so they can kind of get away with things like that. They can kind of have fun with things like that. And, sometimes you also have where people in the companies, there might be an understanding of that. You see it a lot with sports franchises, because within sport, you're competing against each other, but you're also having to help each other because you're participating in the same league. So you need the overall league to be successful. So you might have teams that go back and forth and create these kind of, like these Twitter battles, because it does get a lot of attention. And, sometimes those are, they're not planned beforehand. I think sometimes there's a little bit of planning beforehand, or at least kind of the teams communicating, hey, we're going to go back.
Are you suggesting that, and this could be, are you suggesting there's a possibility that Disney and Universal have this understanding that they go back and forth a little bit?
Well, with Disney and Universal, that doesn't seem as likely.
Okay.
When it's not a sports franchise, because again, like Disney and Universal exist in the entertainment and theme park space, but they're not always having to cooperate with each other.
Right.
Either. Like they obviously did when the park started to reopen. during the pandemic and what they were doing in Southern California, trying to get the parks reopened. So I'm not sure it exists there as much as it would in the sports setting. I'm not real sure on that one.
Before we go further, I just and I don't want to embarrass you with this. I want to read a little bit of your accomplishments and things, and it floors me. So a lot of this I don't even understand. So you're going to be an onlooker on your own, like this is your life, Cody. A professor of sport commerce and director of research in the Kemmons Wilson School at the University of Memphis. He is the director of the Bureau of Sport and Leisure Commerce. His research focuses on the rivalry phenomena in consumer settings to better understand its impact on group membership in society. You developed a scale to measure fan perceptions of rival teams, the rivalry perception scale, which I just think it's amazing. He also developed the phenomena glory out of reflected failure, which I don't even understand that, and validated a scale to measure the fan outcome. And there's a lot more in here. I won't put you on the spot and embarrass you with it, but you do a lot. I mean, this is great stuff that I we don't realize there's somebody out there studying this and doing well with it. And I understand, there's kids that take your class because of this. What ages are the kids that you're teaching? Or are they kids or are they adults?
Yeah, thank you. They're it's college age, and we have a lot of what people typically refer to as non-traditional students, which basically a non-traditional student is someone kind of outside of the 18 to 22, 23 year age range. So we do have those traditional students who are, 17, 18 if they're freshmen, up to 22, 23 if they're seniors. But we also have especially with our graduate students and some other people who are coming back to school, they're older than that age range. They're sometimes in their 30s and things like that. So yeah, we cover a pretty wide swath or gamut of age ranges.
Did you ever look also into rivalries within, let's say, the Disney fandom, like DVC versus resort guests? I mean, there's that too, believe it or not. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of this. People that like one park over the other or one mountain over the other. How much did you get into it with the students when you do Disney?
And we haven't talked much about that. When we started about 4 years ago is when we started comparing sports settings to non-sport settings. And so the first study that we did with that was Disney parks, because I wanted to do something with Disney parks because I use them in my classes all the time. As you know, I teach a class on what it means to be a fan of Disney. You've spoken in that a few times.
He's invited me to do a show, I guess an interview that he showed to the class, which then I got feedback from, which was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for doing it, because it's awesome awesome to be able to do that. And but we really haven't gotten much into within the Disney fandom, because there are so many different routes that you could take. You either could focus on Disney fans kind of lumped together, and that's their in group, versus other theme parks. But you're right. You could Walt Disney World versus Disneyland, Magic Kingdom versus Epcot. You have all of these other.
Disney World versus Disneyland is actually a big thing. Yeah. I joke around. I don't know if you know, I went to Disneyland, and the first thing I joked around with was not my castle. And instead of a lot of people laughing, half of the people were like, "I can't believe you say that. That's the original Walt plan." It was a real, which haunted mansion is better?
Yeah. Well, and when I've had people talk to the class and on the podcast, I've asked them about that as well. If they've been to multiple parks, which haunted mansion's better? Which Pirates of the Caribbean do you like? And the reasons why you like those parks or those attractions. And so there is a lot there. Kind of the overarching thing with Disney to me is, as someone who researches group behavior, I have been told some pretty horrible things.
It's all true. It's all true.
If you're, I have been told if somebody's rival team, if their stadium blew up, they would rejoice and things like that. And you hope people are using hyperbole and they're exaggerating and everything, but it still does. You hear enough of that, and then it feels a little weird. So I joke with my colleagues a lot that I kind of study the more negative aspects of what we're doing, and so what I've seen with just the Disney fandom as compared to other settings like sports, online gaming, politics, things like that, it is a much more kind of jovial, polite, nice setting where people obviously don't always get along, don't agree on things. But when we're talking compared to other settings, I haven't experienced as much negativity within.
Yeah,
the
nobody
Disney
wants to
space.
bring down the other haunted mansion or the other
Yeah.
pirates. Yeah. I also think it has to do sometimes of where, like, I'm partial to Walt Disney World because that's what I know first and I live here. And I'm sure that plays into what I'm going to like better. But I can admit when there's things that are better at Disneyland,
Yeah.
and there are some things. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. Even though I'm telling you there is a nasty aspect to some of it, it's probably a lot less than sports.
Yeah.
I think with the sports, they have to compete. There has to
Yeah.
be a winner and a loser. With Disney and Universal, there really doesn't technically have to be. So,
Well, and what's really interesting, if you look at kind of what we call the antecedents of rivalry, one of those is obviously competition and close competition. And so if you take that from the sports setting and you look at Disney and Universal and you look at the history of Disney and Universal, I mean, at least the story goes that the reason Disneyland actually became as big as it did is because of what Universal City Studios was doing and their studio lot tours. And then Universal, because they were seeing what was happening at Disneyland, they started to make their product a little better. And then, obviously in the 80s when Universal Studios started building Universal Studios in Orlando, and then you had MGM Studios open, and that did get pretty negative between the two companies because you had people making accusations of people not being forthcoming and ethical. But another thing that is like an antecedent or characteristic of rivalry is the competition for personnel. So like if you look at the Yankees Red Sox, like one huge aspect of that rivalry is Babe Ruth being traded or being sold, right? And you look at Disney and Universal and you have a whole bunch of people who work for both companies. But the great thing about that and the competition between the two companies is really it just makes for a better product for all of us fans.
100%.
Because if you like work at one park, there's chances are if you played the 6 Degrees of Separation or the Kevin Bacon game, there's some connection to the other park. So you're going to like things at the other park as well.
Yeah, God knows if and when Disney plans a fifth gate, a fifth theme park. But now that Universal's building Epic Universe, I'm sure that it's on the board somewhere because they can't allow them to steal the entire spotlight. So as a consumer, yeah, it's better for us. Disney without Universal could really lax on the quality of things. What I think is interesting, and again, I don't know if it doesn't really go to what we're talking about, but I just think it's interesting. When Universal counts their theme parks, they count their water parks as parks where Disney doesn't.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of unfair when they say, come visit our 4 parks, and the other one says, no, come, or 3, I think, or whatever it is, come visit ours, and they don't count them. So I don't know. I think that's strange. I think the COVID tennis match back and forth, I think somebody's scared to be looked at as a follower. Somebody's scared to be a leader when they don't know. I think it was really big of Disney to institute the reservation system, even though I don't like it, whereas they can control who's coming day by day and Universal can't. So I just think that's interesting. So
and the last time you spoke to the class, you talked about that, which was really, really interesting that, Disney has more control over what they know they know the number of people who are going to be in their parks every day. So they can plan for it. Whereas Universal doesn't, which is why you've seen some of the stories and the headlines you've seen about Universal with the parks being crowded and things like that. Yeah.
I went to take my niece to see Harry Potter. She only visited for a couple of days from New York. And I thought, all right, I mean, it's going to be busy, but how bad could it be?
Mm-hmm.
My car was telling me that I wasn't going to be at Universal for 35 minutes, but I was a mile and a half away.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've never seen that before, and they were right. The amount of cars backed up, they had 2 people at a toll booth and thousands of cars. It was a catastrophe, and it was bad. And we still got in, but it was, 3-hour wait for one thing.
Yeah.
And I know they didn't want that to be the experience. So.
Yeah, it's definitely different ways of dealing with the situation. And I think some other things we've done with Disney, like one in particular, we asked people how they dealt with the pandemic and the closures of the parks. And as part of that, we did ask kind of their perceptions of the Universal parks. And for the most part, a lot of participants, these were all written responses. They wrote that, they like both parks, but Disney is definitely their favorite, or Disney is kind of the flag bearer, or they are the ones that everybody kind of measures up against. And so it was, again, there's a rivalry there, but someone who has heard some horrible things about what people want to do to outgroups, it's very refreshing that that's not happening within the Disney or theme park space,
So would you say when you do this class, it's like 80% sports and theme parks come in like 20%? What would you?
Well, so I have a class that's specific to rivalry. And
Okay.
on the class that's specific to rivalry, yeah, that's probably 80% sport, maybe even 85% sport. And then I bring in kind of outside examples like Comcast, Disney. We talk about streaming competition now, because the companies now, we actually just published a study today on the competition between like Amazon Prime Video, Netflix, Disney Plus, and
PS5, Xbox.
Yeah, we did something on that, and we also did people who use a console, so PlayStation or Xbox, versus
PC gamers.
doing it on PC. And actually, we've done it in 8. We've done these comparisons in 9 different settings, and we just there was the latest book that's been published has a chapter in it that compares all 9 of those settings. Online gaming was the most negative between people who play games using a PC, and people who use, a console like Xbox or PlayStation to play games. That was more negative than politics was second, sport was
Wow.
third. I expected politics and sport, but online gaming, I mean, that was more negative than both of those.
Yeah, and as long as they're anonymous,
Disney was probably number 7 or 8 down at the bottom. So
as long as they're anonymous with the online gaming, they are disgustingly cutthroat. Yeah,
very much
very opinionated.
So then we do have there's another class, and the class that you've spoken in is an honors class that is called Being a Fan of Disney, and that's all about Disney. So we do kind of talk a little bit about the relationship between Comcast and Disney, or Universal and Disney, and a little bit about we talk a lot about streaming, but mostly we're focused on what Disney is doing. So the history of Disney, the acquisitions of Disney like Pixar, Lucasfilm, Marvel, Fox, and then we spend a lot of time talking about the theme parks and talking about movies. And in this class, like this last week, we actually had a debate and a vote. And if anybody wants to listen to it, it's on the podcast.
Oh yeah, how can people? Yeah, no, tell me, how can people get to your podcast?
So it's available on Apple Podcasts is what I use. So it's available
That's
on there, but it's available through pretty much every major podcast platform. I use Anchor to do it, and so when I publish something, they send it out to every.
so. What do we search for if we want to go
Um,
listen to it?
It's the Being a Fan of Disney podcast, and then I have with Cody T. Havard, PhD. And if you remember, John, the reason I have my title in there is I asked you, "Does this sound arrogant?"
Nope, I think it gives you credibility 100%.
And
And they would
so
the audience would agree with me. It gives you credibility by saying a PhD person is doing this. It's not, 10-year-old Joe Schmo in his room.
well, and that's one of those things that I was embarrassed when you asked me to send you kind of an introduction to me, and I send you an introduction that I use in academia, and it's we are not short on words or letting people know what we've done. So,
But no, you have to be proud of that. There are accomplishments.
yeah,
Not
thank
just
you.
words.
Yeah, I'm very thank
You
you.
got it. You have to be proud of it. That's great. Did you ever think of doing a virtual online class of the Being a Fan of Disney, because I
Yeah,
can
and
picture that being a big thing.
so especially when COVID hit, March 2020, everything shuts down. We go remote, and so at that point, before that, I had already been having conversations with continuing. It's essentially our Office of Continuing Education at the university on how do we offer this for people who want, continuing ed credit, or even people who may want to sign up for 3 hours college credit. And once COVID hit, everything, I think everything just kind of went into not lockdown, but everybody just kind of had to focus on what was right in front of them. So not a lot has been done with that recently. But yeah, I would absolutely love to do it, because this class, the Being a Fan of Disney class, is an incredibly refreshing experience, because again, I said, when I also teach marketing of sport and international organizations in sport. So I'm usually talking about the Olympics, and I'm usually talking about, oh, thank you, Caleb.
Thank you, Caleb.
I'm usually talking about why groups don't like each other. And so to have a chance to talk about Disney and kind of delve into my fandom is awesome. So yeah, if we can ever figure it out, we'll definitely let people know,
Yeah, my
because
friend
I would love to do it.
my friend Christine here told me about a thing called OutSchool, and
Okay.
it's for under 18. You can actually set it up where
Yeah.
you can have them pay for it and do a class like that. But I could see you even doing it on your own through Zoom or something, where adults are paying you separately for the class. I would look
Well,
if you ever do that. Let me know. I'll be the first one.
perfect. Yeah. And for people who want to see the content, they do, like, all the interviews are on the podcast. And also the YouTube link on my YouTube channel, I have the interviews, and early on, before COVID, I would record some of the classes.
What is the
Um,
name of that YouTube channel? Do you know it off
it's
the top of your head?
it's so my channel. You search for Cody Havard, or maybe Cody Havard PhD, and then it's a the playlist is Being a Fan of Disney.
Putting your name in the chat here. It's like Harvard without the R.
Yeah, it and I always get, of all of the ways that my last name's pronounced, you can never complain. I never complain about it anyway, because it's kind of a weird, hard name to pronounce, but you can't complain if you're called Harvard. I mean,
Cody Havard.
Yeah.
So tell me about your fandom. Were you always a Disney fan, or was it because of what you do that you say you're a fan, or were you always a Disney fan?
Yeah, I was always a fan. We didn't go to the parks for a long time. I went maybe 3 or 4 times when I was a kid, and then there probably was 20 to maybe 25-year gap between going as a kid, and then 2012 was the first time I went back. And I went with my wife. We were dating at the time, but she went with me, and I had a conference in Orlando, and it was at the end of October. So we were going to go, and I had planned out, okay, I definitely want to see Magic Kingdom because that's always been my favorite park. But I want to see the Indiana Jones stunt show, and I want to do all these things at all these different parks. And I had never been to Animal Kingdom. And so I was balancing that with my wife had never been at the time. And so I was thinking, what should she see and all of this? So through the conference, I ended up getting we had a discounted rate for the Park Hopper Pass. So we had 2-day tickets. And so I did all of this planning, and we show up at the Magic Kingdom, and it is almost empty. I mean, it was the last week of October, the week before Halloween, and it was also when Superstorm Sandy was blowing in, so that kind of pushed people away. And so, we walked on to the first 3 or 4 rides, and I looked at my wife and I said that I have never had this experience before. And so since then, when we've been back, I've been back 3 times since then. We always try to plan a time when, I look at the crowd schedules and everything to see when the crowds are going to be lower. Because now we have 2 kids, and I think everybody knows it's much easier to not wait in line, especially if you run out of snacks. So I'm definitely trying to plan around which parks we need to be at and what attractions we need to be at.
Just recently, they've been pretty good with the crowds.
Yeah.
Just recently now, there's some days where you're like, wow, it's pretty good. I'm sure it's going to get busy again with October 1st and all that. So the whole anniversary thing. I'm trying to think of what else you do in this class that is going to be more of interest to me. Well, how old are the kids? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
They're most of these kids a lot of them are freshmen. And then you do have some sophomores to seniors, but they're usually the 18 to 22, 23-year-old age range. Because at our university we have what's called honors forums, which is basically just a class to allow people to sort of unplug from their major classes or even their minor general ed classes. And so they're designed so that people can just have fun. They don't have to worry too much about assignments and everything. They get to meet people outside of their majors. So it's fun every year when we introduce or have people introduce themselves. We'll have, people that are going to be in business and marketing and finance, but we have some pre-med or pre-dental, some engineering, some entertainment management. And so it's really fun to get that aspect as well. It's the University of Memphis. And then the class, just when I started teaching it, I literally was going to show videos of ride-throughs of rides and attractions. And that was the first reason I reached out to you was actually watching the Dreamfinders, the documentary. And that kind of sort of sparked my Disney fandom again. And eventually I just talked about it enough that a colleague said, why don't you teach one of these classes on it? And so I went in the first day of class and I asked the students, I said, hey, here's what I plan to talk about, but is there anything you want to talk about? And I mean, they just opened up the can of worms with it. They wanted to know the history of the company. They wanted to know how the parks were built. One person wanted to know how to start a theme park. And I said that's not this class. And so it really just kind of allowed me to take this deep dive into my fandom. And so for the last 4 or 5 years, I've probably read and or listened to, 30 or 40 different books about different aspects of Disney, about Pixar, Marvel, getting into books like Disney War and things like that have helped kind of shape where this class is going.
Speaking of books, you wrote a book, right? Or two?
Yeah. The latest one, came out actually Sunday, I think.
Stop it.
And it's an academic book, so we're writing about studies and everything in it. But it's comparing out-group behavior within the sport context and outside of the sport context. Eventually, one thing that I want to do is, in another year or two, the pandemic kind of slowed everything down because I do want to travel a little bit when I'm doing this. But eventually, I plan to write a book about Disney fandom, and kind of talking about, from a, I guess, quasi-academic perspective, what fandom is, but what it is in the Disney setting, but also to tell my story as a fan as well, because I'm a big believer in that everybody does have a story to tell, and if you can tell it, you should tell it.
I think that's a good idea. You should write that book for sure.
Yeah, it's one that, when, as an academic, we write books we have our certain academic companies that we go with. This would be one that I wouldn't go with one of the academic publishers. I would go with another novelty publisher.
There's like Theme Park Press or something.
Yeah.
Whoever did Ron Schneider's book or something like that.
Yeah, I reached out to Theme Park Press a long time ago, actually, about it.
They might. Do they ever contact you back at all?
Yeah, they. This was probably 2 or 3 years ago, when the idea was not what it is now.
Okay.
And so they said, "Hey, it sounds interesting. Let's have some more details on it." And then that's kind of when I was sort of getting my feet wet with the class. And then things kind of, sped up with when the pandemic hit, is really when I realized I could do interviews, much like yourself, how you told me. I could do interviews using Zoom. And so I didn't have to have people only speak into a class when they could fit the class schedule and everything. I could do it whenever it was possible for the two people participating in the interview. And so pre-pandemic, I think I had 2 or 3 people a semester talk. During the pandemic, I've been able to have hundreds. 25, 30 interviews. It's just awesome being able to talk to people about their Disney fandom. And every interview I go into, or I call them visits, because I'm not really sure I'm that great of an interviewer.
I'm going to go with that. I like visits better than interviews.
I walk away from each visit thinking, man, I didn't know that about that person, or I didn't know that about that kind of specific area of fandom and everything. So it's awesome to be able to talk to people about it all the time.
The chat room is slightly behind on the timeline because that's about a minute. So I want to ask them now, if you guys have any questions that you want to ask Cody, type them in there. I will try to get him as many as I can. It is a weird thing. It's a weird thing to say that, somebody studies rivalry of sports teams and they try to put it into theme parks and stuff. It's very interesting to me, though. The whole psychology of it is interesting. On why do we have to choose? We do like to choose as a people. We don't like to. I mean, I have an annual pass to both Universal and Disney, but I do like to know that I enjoy Disney better, and why. Why can't I say I like them both the same? I mean, I have my reasons, but it's funny how, as a people, we do like to grab onto one thing and say that that's ours.
Well,
so if you have any,
if you think about it's our psychology. It's the way we make sense of the world, that we have our group and we have people that are not in our group. And it's much more pronounced in settings like sport and politics and, unbeknownst to me, online gaming, than it is in some other consumer settings. But yeah, it's there all the time. It's how we make sense of things.
I'm not sure that Cody would know this, but because I wouldn't think unless he's studied that specifically. But did you? I don't know if in your travels have you seen a rather than Disney World, Disneyland, have you seen Knott's Berry Farms and Disneyland rivalry at all?
I haven't, because so far we've focused on Disney, but we actually are. I'm doing the survey. I was doing it this morning, and we're about to do a study on just broaden it to theme park fandom. Where in the first time we did this, we reached Disney fans and we just identified Universal as their rival. This time, we're actually going to ask people to identify their favorite park. So they could say something like Walt Disney World or Magic Kingdom or Disneyland or Universal Hollywood or Florida. And then they identify the park that they feel is the biggest rival of that park. So they could say different Six Flags parks. And we're trying to work out where is it better to kind of talk about specific parks like Magic Kingdom or Animal Kingdom, or does someone identify with Merlin Entertainment, or do they identify with Universal Parks or Disney Parks? So that's all the kind of the
then there's
of it, you know?
then there's subcategories. Like with Knott's, it could be that the food, because I hear the Knott's food is amazing. Could be that the food is better than Disneyland, but the attractions are better at Disneyland. There's so many different things that people can grab onto there. That's pretty amazing. You have to start writing quick.
Yeah, and that, I want to be able to I want to tell my story. I want to use what we've done in the class. And so, when the thing is, when there are constantly new ideas that are coming up. And so eventually you just have to get to the point where, yes, you just start writing and you kind of start putting pen to the paper or fingers to the keypad, and start it again. But yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate the support of that. And I also, if you don't mind, like I said, this is a class that I love giving the students the opportunity to hear from different fans. So if anybody wants to, if you want to talk, reach out to me.
How can they contact you? Give me an email.
It's C Havard. So I'll spell it.
I'm putting
CHAVARD at memphis.edu. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. The podcast does have like a public group on Facebook, Being a Fan of Disney. And then people can follow me on Twitter. They can reach me various ways. That's one of the easiest ways or quickest ways to reach me, I think.
Yeah, Christine was saying even Halloween Horror Nights versus Hollow Scream, which is the Busch Gardens one versus Universal. That is another big. You got your people that will, this is better because this, and this, and they are absolutely sure of it. And the other people, this is better because of this. Very, very interesting stuff.
Well, and the one thing that you asked, how much rivalry do we get into with in the Disney class? And every semester we have discussions and votes on like best attraction. And we talk about Walt Disney World because where we are in Memphis, if students have been to a Disney park, they've usually been to Walt Disney World. They more likely than going to Disneyland. So we'll have, at the end of the semester, we kind of have debates over their favorite attractions or the best attractions. We do one over Disney movies. We just this last week did one on the best Marvel or MCU movie and MCU character. That's actually the latest podcast that I published today. And it's always fun, especially when we're back on campus now. So we're doing these face-to-face. We're masked, but we're doing them face-to-face. And so to hear people's kind of persuasion and their arguments about, not arguments in a bad way, but them trying to persuade each other why Doctor Strange is better than Spider-Man Far From Home, it's awesome. it's fun. Like I said, this class is one that is extremely refreshing, to be able to talk about all of this. And now, with the faculty and the students, I have the reputation of, if you want to talk about Disney, talk to this guy, but set a timer, because it's going to run long if you're not careful. As you know, the first time you spoke to the class, we talked for about 40 minutes. This
great.
last time it was almost 2 hours. So
I couldn't imagine getting credits for a college course that talked about Disney. That's a good thing. I am going to encourage everybody here to please go to your favorite place that you get podcasts, and give me that name of that podcast again. It's Being a Fan of Disney by Cody Havard.
yeah, being a fan of Disney podcast with Cody T. Havard, PhD.
Cody T. Havard.
Yeah.
How many other Cody Havards are there out there?
Yeah, I know.
No, Cody T. Havard, PhD.
That's one of those academic publishing things.
Go subscribe. I can't wait to be a guest again when I'm back in your class. I think we did it twice now. Can't wait to do it again. And I thank you for coming here and having this chat with me. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And as I've told you off camera before, but I'll embarrass you a little bit. This is awesome, being able to do this. So this was really, really cool for you to have me on and get to talk to people. So thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Yeah, I know I'm going to see you again. I know you'll see me again. So I'm just going to do some quick ending with these people here, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you again, sir. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your time very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
I cut him off right there. He said, bye, everybody. When I say I appreciate your time very much, if you look at the list of what he does, you go, oh my God, it's the president coming by, and he's going to laugh. I know about that. Let's see. What else to tell you guys? Very quickly, I went to Space 220 at Epcot. Wow. I expected a lot. And Cody, you can either stay or leave. Doesn't matter. I know you're in the room there. I just don't want you to feel pressure there. But I saw the Space 220. I expected a lot. But what I got, I felt was more. I thought the trip going up to the space station, the food, the atmosphere, can't wait to go again. So I went to go make a reservation for my birthday in November, and they said they're booked into the foreseeable future. So I'm kind of mad that I went like on the news this morning and told people about it, because I mean, I'm sure it was booked up before then. I'm just kidding, but I don't want anybody else to book it up. I'm going to tell you it's not that good, because you can't get a reservation. It's just that good. You can wait. It was a 3-hour wait yesterday and today, and I hate to say this, the people aren't going to be disappointed even waiting 3 hours. I wouldn't wait 3 hours, but they're going to love it once they get up there. I know it. It's that different of a thing. I'm glad it's something somebody created. When you get a chance, please go to bigfatpanda.com. If you can go to YouTube, everyone, and make sure you are subscribed. I find a lot of people forget to subscribe to the YouTube and get notifications by ringing the bell. Same thing, go to Cody's podcast, Being a Fan of Disney by Cody T. Havard. Please go and listen to his podcast, at least the episode that I'm in, at the very least. But you'll probably want to listen to more of it. So, somebody, Bill, if they are in space, there is no atmosphere. Bill, they actually try to explain that. On the elevator, they tell you, gravity generators now active. And there's a whole bunch of signs about if gravity is lost, what to do. It's a little scary. So thanks, everyone. I will talk to you soon. We'll have some announcements. You might see something here, but we will have some announcements about this, official announcements. Yes, I took a job working for The Diz. It is a full-time job. It's not just being an ad sponsor for them like we were with MEI Mouse Fan, who we do love and appreciate, but we had to take a full-time job with a lot more responsibilities. So our travel partner now is Dreams Unlimited Travel. There will be a lot more about them in the future. And The Diz and all things that they do, and moving to Orlando, which is their real estate company, if you're thinking about moving to Disney. So contact me with anything like that, and I will talk to you all soon. Hopefully the storm doesn't come. Chris, weather-wise, is it okay? I love you all. I will talk to you soon. Mwah.